This is Hollywood. Matías Bombal with you. The Dakota Group offers Lisa Amordino Vierland's documentary, Peggy Guggenheim, Art Addict, completed last year, about a singular woman from a famous family that influenced art, artists, and the appreciation of same unlike any other person in the modern era. The movie's director, intrigued by her subject's colorful life between 1898 and 1979, began by talking with Guggenheim's biographer, B.Weld, who wrote Peggy, the Wayward Guggenheim. During the course of several meetings with Weld, the reference recordings of ongoing interviews between Weld and Guggenheim recorded during the 1978 and 79 period were discovered in Weld's basement. They were thought to have been long lost. Armed with this remarkable audio, direct from Guggenheim's own voice and memory, Vierland had a wonderful way to tell Peggy's amazing story in her own words, and with images and movies over the years that include associations with almost all of the great modern artists since the 1920s.
She just broke all the rules. There weren't that many precedents for women working, let alone working in the arts. It was a very male-dominated field.
It was my freedom, my liberation.
Peggy is a sort of model for the liberated woman, a very disturbed, liberated woman. She did what she wanted to do. She had the means to do it. But I think she really was in advance of her times.
There were other women, and there was, above all, another American Jewish woman in the form of Gertrude Stein, whose example Peggy may have been following. I think that Peggy would love to have had Gertrude Stein's gifts for words and her extraordinary ability to promote herself.
She liked helping the artists, and she liked being like Gertrude Stein and having a good eye in picking the winners.
She also had the guts to buy Cubist paintings, which in those days were not valued as nearly as highly as they are today.
Peggy Guggenheim was the least wealthy of the famous family. She started her young life with a great shock. When she was 13, her father, Benjamin Guggenheim, along with his valet, Victor Higlio, bravely faced death in the freezing Atlantic Ocean with elegance in white tie, a rose in his buttonhole, as they descended to the bottom of the ocean, seated in deck chairs and smoking cigars in the rapidly flooding first-class foyer of the grand staircase aboard the Titanic. Heard in the film's soundtrack, Peggy's biographer wondered if she was angry to have lost her father or perhaps felt abandoned. Guggenheim answered, "How could I be? I thought it was very noble." The picture opens with a beautiful title sequence in the style of modern art and Jackson Pollock, one of her protégés. Before the title came to a close, you hear Peggy say right at the outset, "My first great achievement was the discovery of Jackson Pollock. My collection, my second achievement." She continues, "It was all about art and love." In this movie, director Vierland shows us how Guggenheim used art to turn herself into a personality, as a collector. With an inheritance of $450,000, Guggenheim was an independent teen distant from her mother with whom she did not relate. Peggy began to expose herself through modern art via the New York bookstore, the Sunwise Turn, a known center for the avant-garde in the metropolis. It triggered a passion that would last her entire life, according to Vierland's movie, which blossomed when she went to Paris from 1921 until 1938. This documentary features classic film clips as well as multiple interviews with those who knew her and were close to her. The film clips are of an excellent visual quality. Still images help tell the story with some movement in and out of the image, cleverly focusing on an aspect of the photo, but never in such a way that it draws attention to itself, and I must say, quite tastefully done. Here we see and learn about her show of all-women painters in her New York Art of the Century Gallery.
You give any shows to women? Just one-man shows?
Yes, a lot of women.
Another really important exhibition that Peggy did was called 31 Women, the first time that there'd ever been an exhibition devoted only to women artists, both American and European.
I think it was the first show of exclusive women artists ever. And it was, Louise Nevelson and Leonora Carrington and Merritt Oppenheim and so on. It was a remarkable show.
Peggy was a sister in a lot of ways. She had a lot of really close female friends, and despite all of her activity with various men, at the end of the day, she really believed very strongly in women.
The movie then becomes a parade of the who's who of modern art and culture, in which Guggenheim participated, encouraged, or bought or sold over the years. You'll see her influenced by Marcel Duchamp, Samuel Beckett, and others. Her encouragement and support to Jackson Pollock and so many others is investigated and shared quite frankly. You'll visit her collection as it moved from country to country over the years, ending up in Venice.
There were constant tryouts for the role of lover. I mean, there were local boys. I remember when Nelly van Doesburg, the widow of van Doesburg, the Dutch modernist painter, came to stay, and Peggy was adding on a few rooms to the palazzo. So there were a lot of rather good-looking young Italian stonemasons and plasterers around. And Nelly and Peggy both lusted after the same young plasterer. And there were terrible shrieks and rows and so on.
I remember she would like to laugh about her Marino Marini statue in front of her palace with the detachable penis, which she would take off when the cardinal would visit her.
Marino Marini explained to me that it was not at all a sexual symbol, but simply the ecstasy of a young man in the joy of living.
So few people single-handedly start out to make a museum.
Yes. After trying all over the world, I finally accomplished it here.
Her palazzo there is now the home of her collection and the museum of it. A collection now priceless, remarkably acquired when the paintings were new for a total of $40,000 if one adds up her purchase prices of these works. Remarkable. During the Second World War, she managed to get all of her paintings and some artists out of Europe safely.
Then, when the war began, you left London.
Oh, I was sent to Paris to collect the pictures on the list that Herbert Reed had made for me. During the first winter of the war, I tried to buy one painting a day.
How did you go about doing that?
Well, I had friends in Paris, Madame van Doesburg, who was my best friend for years and years. And I had a friend who was a sort of art dealer called Howard Putzel. And I had Marcel Duchamp, who introduced me to artists. So between these three people, and went around on my own and bought things. People telephoned me all day long and even came to my house in the morning and brought me pictures in bed. And actually, the only one I literally bought in bed was this little darling.
She was lucky in her choice of time because in 1939, the artists were desperate to sell things. And a number of the dealers were Jewish and were getting the hell out of Paris before the Germans arrived.
You could have wound up in a concentration camp.
Yes, I know that.
Were you ever afraid you'd be captured by the Germans?
No. It's in my nature to be afraid.
This runs the gamut from Kandinsky to De Niro, Robert De Niro, the movie actor, who on screen recalls his parents' paintings being shown by Peggy Guggenheim in New York when he was a mere 3 years of age in the Art of the Century Gallery and exhibit. He later returned to Venice as a teenager to see his mother, Virginia Admiral's, paintings there, where it remains to this day. This was a singular, unusual woman who created and invented her own destiny and savored it every moment along the way. I accomplished what I wanted to do and did it very successfully, and I'm very happy about that, she is heard saying in her own voice in this documentary. I venture, after seeing this picture, that Peggy Guggenheim herself was the central color work of her own collection. This movie has not been rated by the Motion Picture Association of America. This is your pal, Matías Bombal, bidding you a fond farewell.